He planned to disown me in front of 400 people. I exposed a decade of betrayal in front of the world. David Richardson's voice roared through the Westfield High School gymnasium, silencing a crowd of 400. My name had just been called to receive my diploma when his words struck like a thunderclap. He declared I was not his real son and that he would no longer provide financial support. For a moment, even the restless baby in the third row ceased crying. My feet were frozen mid-step, and the joyful cheers that should have accompanied my name were replaced with stunned gasps. My name is Blake. I am 18, and on the most significant day of my life, my adoptive father, David, decided to sever our ties publicly. But he miscalculated. Unlike what Dave expected, I did not crumble. I smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that Catherine, my late adoptive mother, always adored. Because David's betrayal was the opportunity one had been preparing for, the perfect moment to expose a labyrinth of secrets hidden beneath his polished facade. I approached the podium, ignoring the principal's attempts to redirect me to the diploma table. I had a story to tell, and it needed an audience. I pulled a white envelope from my graduation folder, holding it like a blade aimed straight at David's heart. David is right. I am not his biological son. Catherine had told me the truth when I was 12, ensuring I understood I was chosen, cherished, and loved. But today was not just about my story. It was about unraveling the lies David so carefully constructed. I declared that the infant David paraded as his son was, in fact, his nephew. Lisa, David's current wife, had been entangled in an affair with his brother, Michael, for over a year. The DNA results in my hand confirmed it. The gym erupted into chaos. Phones captured every gasp, every stifled cry. Lisa, visibly unraveling, fled the scene, her designer heels clattering against the gym floor. But David remained, his previous arrogance replaced by a hollow, crumbling man. Yet this moment was only the surface. To understand how we reached this explosive revelation, one had to peel back the layers of David Richardson's life. A man who governed his family with the same cold precision as a corporate boardroom. Dinners were business meetings. Holidays were strategic operations. Catherine, my adoptive mother, was the warmth in an otherwise clinical household. She was my refuge until cancer stole her away 4 years ago. Lisa entered our lives a mere 6 months after Catherine's funeral. She was the antithesis of my mother, cold, meticulously crafted, and dripping with superficial charm. David married her within 8 months. The house transformed into a sterile showroom, and with her arrival, I became an afterthought, a leftover from a chapter David desperately wanted to close. When Lisa announced her pregnancy, David's joy was a knife twisting in my gut. The excitement, the tenderness he displayed were a stark contrast to the detached, transactional relationship he had with me. It was then that I realized my place in this family was being systematically erased. Lisa's influence over David was suffocating, turning our home into a stage where I was the unwanted prop. The birth of Ethan was the final blow. David's affection was reserved solely for his new son, a child he believed was his biological heir. But patterns began to emerge. Michael's frequent visits, Lisa's secretive phone calls, the extravagant gifts. The more I observed, the clearer the betrayal became. One night, a whispered phone call between Lisa and Michael shattered any remaining illusions. Lisa spoke of Michael's persistent gifts, cautioning him about David's growing suspicions. She referred to Ethan as Michael's son, promising that in time, the truth would surface. That night, my strategy crystallized. Confrontation was futile. I needed irrefutable evidence. Lisa's arrogance became her downfall. Her lies became sloppier, her secrets more accessible. I began gathering receipts, recording phone calls, and capturing stolen moments between her and Michael. The home security system David had installed unwittingly became my greatest asset, archiving every clandestine encounter. 3 months of surveillance painted a damning portrait of infidelity and manipulation. Lisa cooing to Ethan about his real father, Michael, entering our home with a key David never knew he had, intimate exchanges disguised beneath the thin veil of familial concern. My collection of evidence grew into a formidable arsenal. But David's disdain towards me intensified. Influenced by Lisa's venomous whispers, he began imposing arbitrary rules, curfews, revoked privileges, demeaning chores. The final straw came when I overheard their conversation 3 weeks before graduation. David, with Lisa's encouragement, planned to announce the severing of my financial support during the ceremony, a public execution of my place in their lives. The betrayal was complete, but so was my preparation. I had the evidence, the motive, and now, the perfect stage. Collecting the DNA samples was a precise operation. Michael's hair was easily retrieved from the bathroom after his Sunday visits. David's was plucked from his hairbrush. Ethan's DNA came from a pacifier Lisa carelessly left on the coffee table. A discreet lab across town, unbothered by legal formalities, provided the final confirmation. In those 3 weeks leading up to graduation, I documented every detail with surgical precision. Lisa's lies grew bolder, her facade cracking under the weight of her deceit. David remained blissfully ignorant, his arrogance blinding him to the reality unfolding beneath his roof. The graduation ceremony was not a spontaneous outburst of emotion. It was a meticulously orchestrated exposure. David sought to humiliate me, but I had weaponized his secrets, turning his stage into a battlefield where every lie would be laid bare. Standing at the podium, I wasn't just a disowned son. I was the harbinger of truth. My voice carried not just through the gymnasium, but through the very foundation of David's carefully curated life. Every revelation was a blow, not of anger, but of cold, calculated precision. The collapse of David Richardson had begun, and there was no refuge from the avalanche of truth descending upon him. This was only the beginning. The layers of betrayal, corruption, and deceit extended far beyond a single public humiliation. What David, Lisa, and Michael failed to understand was that I had transformed from a passive bystander into an architect of their downfall. The story was far from over. The real battle was just beginning. The bracelet angered me more than anything else. David had given it to Michael to keep after Catherine's death, saying he wanted to preserve her memory in the family. Seeing Lisa wearing a symbol of my mother's love as a trophy of her betrayal was the moment any hesitation I still had disappeared completely. David, meanwhile, was growing increasingly confident about his graduation plans. During dinners, he would make comments about personal responsibility and learning to support yourself. Lisa would smile and agree, her eyes shining with barely concealed satisfaction. 18 is old enough to be independent, she would say, tucking Ethan into her lap. It's time for Blake to build his own life. The call from the lab came on a Thursday afternoon. I was at work at the bookstore when my phone rang. Mr. Richardson, your results are ready for pickup. My hand shook as I hung up. This was the moment of truth. Once I saw those results, there would be no turning back. I drove to the lab after work, my stomach in knots. Linda handed me a sealed envelope with my name on it. The results are pretty conclusive, she said, but I couldn't read her expression. I sat in my car in the lab parking lot, staring at the envelope. Part of me wanted to rip it open right then and there. Another part wanted to throw it away and pretend none of this had happened. Instead, I drove home and hid the envelope in my copy of Catherine's Jane Eyre, her favorite book, which she had read to me countless times when I was little. It seemed fitting to hide evidence of one family's secrets inside a story about another orphan girl trying to find her place in the world. I didn't open the envelope that day or that week because some instinct told me I was saving it for something, for a moment when I would need the perfect weapon. That moment came on graduation morning when I heard David and Lisa planning my public humiliation downstairs. Perfect timing, David was saying. Public final. No room for emotional manipulation. Lisa laughed softly. Well, that will certainly solve our little problem. With Blake out of the way, Ethan can grow up as the only child. That morning, I finally opened the envelope. 99.9% certain Michael was Ethan's biological father. I sat on my bed holding the results and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Complete control over my destiny. David thought he was setting me up for an ambush at graduation. He had no idea he was walking right into mine. As I dressed carefully that morning, not for him, but for myself, I tucked the DNA results into my graduation folder right next to the speech I knew I would never give. The drive to school was tense. David drove with that determined expression I knew so well, the same one he wore before important meetings where he planned to dismantle competitors. Lisa was fidgety in the passenger seat, compulsively adjusting the rearview mirror and checking her makeup for the 5th time. "Are you okay?" David asked her, but his tone suggested the question was more polite than genuine. "Just nervous about the speech," Lisa lied, softly rocking Ethan on her lap. "I want everything to be perfect for Blake." The irony was so thick, I almost choked. In the Westfield High School gym, David chose our seats strategically. 4th row center, close enough to be seen, far enough away to make a discreet exit. He settled in with his arms crossed, checking his phone repeatedly like an executive waiting for a presentation he knew he would completely dominate. Lisa sat next to him, her fingers drumming nervously on the strap of her purse. Ethan was fidgety, as if he could feel the tension in the air. Other parents laughed and took pictures, the typical energy of a graduation ceremony filling the space. David had no idea he was about to become the center of a drama that would destroy his life in a matter of minutes. The ceremony began normally. The principal gave a speech about new beginnings and endless possibilities. The valedictorian spoke about pursuing dreams and overcoming obstacles. I barely heard the words. My focus was entirely on David, watching for any sign of what was to come. When they began calling names in alphabetical order, the atmosphere in the gym became electric. Each graduate had their moment, celebrated with applause, shouts of encouragement, and camera flashes. Then it was my turn. Blake Richardson. I stood up, smoothed my cap, and began the walk toward the stage. The gymnasium settled into that respectful silence that accompanies each graduate's moment. That's when David stood up, not to applaud, not to shout with pride. He stood up as if he were about to make a corporate announcement. "Blake is not my real son." His voice cut through the silence like a knife. "So I'm cutting off all financial support as of today." The gym erupted in shocked murmurs and gasps. People turned in their seats, trying to process what they had just witnessed. Phones moved toward us, already recording. "I have no obligation to pay for college for someone who isn't related to me," David continued, completely confident. "It's time for him to learn what real life is like." Lisa was frantically pulling at his sleeve, whispering, "David, no, not like this," but he ignored her completely. Ethan started to cry, probably feeling the tension, but David was so focused on his moment of power that he didn't even notice. What he also didn't notice was my smile. I walked straight to the podium instead of the diploma table. The principal tried to direct me to the correct spot, but I shook my head gently. "I need to respond to this," I said, adjusting the microphone. The gym was so quiet you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. 400 people leaned forward, waiting to see how this bizarre situation would unfold. I took the envelope out of my graduation folder, the same envelope I had carried around for 2 weeks waiting for this exact moment. "David is right," I began, my voice carrying clearly through the microphone. "I'm not his biological son. I've known this my entire life. Catherine told me when I was 12, and she made sure I understood how loved and wanted I was." David's confident posture began to falter. This wasn't the script he had planned. He had expected tears, humiliation, a silent retreat. Not this. But since we're sharing family secrets about DNA, I continued, holding the envelope. "Perhaps it's only fair that everyone knows the whole truth." Lisa wasn't just pale anymore. She was gray. She shook her head frantically, whispering no over and over. Her hand was shaking so badly, she almost dropped Ethan. "You see," I said, opening the envelope slowly, "sometimes the people who throw rocks live in the most fragile glass houses." The sound of the paper being opened echoed impossibly loud in the silent gym. "Your son, that precious baby you've been showing off for the last 8 months, is not biologically yours, David." The explosion was immediate. People gasped, screamed, and stood up to get a better look. Cell phones recorded from every angle. Chaos was breaking out, but I wasn't finished. Lisa has been having an affair with your brother Michael for over a year. I continued, my voice cutting through the noise. The baby she's holding right now is your nephew, not your son. David slumped back into his chair as if someone had cut his legs out from under him. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The transformation on his face was spectacular. Confidence turning to confusion, confusion turning to horror, horror turning to devastating understanding. Lisa made a strangled sound and rushed toward the exit, still carrying Ethan. She was running, tripping over people's feet, her high heels hitting the gym floor like gunshots. I have the DNA test results right here, I announced, waving the official papers. 99.9% certainty Michael Richardson is the biological father of this child. The gym descended into complete chaos. People shouted questions, pointed, and stood on chairs to get a better view. My classmates on stage were frozen, their graduations forgotten. But I wasn't done. Oh, and Lisa, I shouted, even though she was already halfway out the doors. You might want to be more careful about where you leave your hotel receipts, your jewelry bills, and especially that bracelet that belonged to my mother. The heavy doors slammed behind her with a sound like thunder. I turned to David, who was staring at me as if he'd never seen me before. His face had gone from confident to devastated in a matter of minutes. You wanted to cut me off, I said, my voice still carrying through the microphone. You wanted to humiliate me publicly. You wanted to make sure everyone knew I wasn't part of your family. I walked to the edge of the stage, looking directly at him. Well, congratulations. You just gave me the perfect opportunity to return the favor. The crowd was in a frenzy now. People were recording, taking pictures, and already posting on social media. This would go viral in an hour. By tomorrow, the entire town would know that David Richardson, successful businessman and pillar of the community, had been cheated on by his wife and brother. I tucked the DNA results back into my folder and walked up to the diploma table. The principal, looking completely overwhelmed, handed me my diploma with trembling hands. Congratulations, Mr. Richardson, he whispered. Thank you, I replied, posing for the official photo as if nothing had happened. It's been a memorable day. As I walked off the stage, diploma in hand, I could hear David behind me. He was shouting my name, his voice cracked and desperate. Blake, wait, please, we need to talk. But I didn't turn around. I didn't stop walking. I had spent 18 years waiting for his approval, his acceptance, his love. I had spent months planning for this exact moment, knowing that sooner or later, he would try to push me out of his life. I just never expected him to make it this easy. The trap he had set for me, the calculated public humiliation, the strategic cruelty had backfired spectacularly. He wanted to discard me quietly, make me disappear without a fuss. Instead, he gave me the perfect stage for my revenge. And the best part, every word I said was true. The DNA test, the affair, the hotel receipts. I had proof of everything. As I pushed open the gym doors, I could still hear the chaos behind me. People shouting questions, phones ringing, the principal desperately trying to restore order. But I was done with all of it. Done with David. Done with his fake family. Done with pretending to be grateful for crumbs of affection. I had my diploma, my scholarship to Columbia, and the satisfaction of knowing that sometimes the best revenge is simply the truth. The parking lot was almost empty. Everyone was still inside, glued to their seats by the drama. I walked to my beat-up Honda, threw my cap in the back seat, and started the engine. In my rear-view mirror, I could see people starting to file out of the gym, talking excitedly, phones glued to their ears. I smiled again and drove away. Let them talk. Let the whole town talk. I was finally free. But the real question was, would David survive the complete collapse of the reality he thought he knew? Because when the dust settled, there would be nothing left of the perfect world he thought he had. 3 months after graduation, David had lost everything. His divorce from Lisa was finalized in record time. She disappeared with Ethan and was never seen in town again. Michael tried to deny everything until the evidence became undeniable. He lost his most important contracts when the story spread through business circles. David was left alone in the house where there had once been a family. That's when he showed up at my apartment door, unrecognizable. His hair was messy, his suit was wrinkled, and his eyes were red from exhaustion. "Blake," his voice was broken. "I need to talk to you." We sat on the small patio behind the building. For a few minutes, neither of us spoke. "You were right to expose me," he said finally. "I just wish I had protected you before. I wish I had been the father you deserved instead of the coward I was." For the first time in my life, I saw David truly cry. Not tears of self-pity, but of genuine regret. "Can I forgive you?" he asked, his voice barely audible. I thought of Catherine, of her words about choosing love over fear. I thought of all the anger I had carried and how it had only kept me stuck in the past. "Yes," I replied simply. "I forgive you." The forgiveness wasn't for him. It was for me. It was about choosing what kind of person I wanted to be. Today, 2 years later, David and I have dinner together once a month. He's in therapy, working to become a better person. We're not a perfect family, but we're real. I've discovered that the best revenge isn't destroying someone. It's refusing to let their pain destroy you. It's building a life so full that the past loses its power to define you. The truth always wins, and love is always stronger than revenge. 2 years had passed since that unforgettable graduation day. The town had moved on to other scandals, but the ripples of what happened in that gym still followed David and me. I had settled into college life at Columbia, balancing classes with a part-time job at a local bookstore. The city was everything Westfield wasn't: chaotic, anonymous, and liberating. Here, I was not David Richardson's son or the boy from the graduation scandal. I was just Blake. But David's life had been reduced to rubble. His company, once a powerhouse in local business circles, had crumbled under the weight of public scrutiny and lost trust. Former allies turned their backs, investors withdrew, and even family friends vanished. Michael had vanished after the fallout, running from both the scandal and his guilt. Lisa? No one heard from her again after she fled with Ethan. David reached out a few times during my first year at Columbia, always through tentative emails or brief text messages. I ignored them. I wasn't ready. My focus was on building something new, something mine. But as time passed, the sharp edge of my anger dulled into a hollow ache. One cold evening in March, I found David waiting outside the bookstore where I worked. He looked thinner, older, his suit ill-fitted, as if he'd lost not just weight, but the structure that once defined him. He didn't speak immediately. He just held out a small, worn box. "It's Catherine's," he said. Inside was the bracelet, the one Lisa had flaunted like a trophy. "I don't deserve to keep this." We went to a nearby cafe, sitting across from each other like two people with a shared past but uncertain future. David wasn't the towering figure from my childhood anymore. His arrogance was replaced by something fragile, something real. "I've spent 2 years in therapy," he began. 2 years dissecting every decision, every manipulation. And I've come to realize that power and control were just my shields. Shields that cost me my marriage, my family, and almost you. I listened cautiously. Words were easy, but change was not. "I don't expect forgiveness, Blake. I know I've done unforgivable things. But I want you to know I'm trying. I'm trying to be someone Catherine would have been proud of." We sat in silence for a long while. The weight of years between us wasn't going to be yet. There was no mistaking the tremor in his voice, the humility in his lowered gaze. Niche in a single conversation. But it was a start. "I forgave you once," I said quietly. "But forgiveness doesn't mean trust. That you'll have to earn." "I'm ready to do that," he replied. True to his word, David didn't push. He sent occasional updates, small victories from therapy, volunteer work he'd taken up, even photos of the community garden he helped maintain. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, we began to rebuild something. It wasn't the conventional father-son relationship. It was something different, raw, honest, and painstakingly real. By the time I graduated from Columbia, David was there, sitting quietly in the back row. No grand gestures, no public announcements. Just a father silently cheering his son. After the ceremony, we stood outside, surrounded by families taking pictures. David extended his hand, but I pulled him into a brief, awkward hug. "No microphones this time," I joked. He smiled, a real one, not the polished corporate grin I had grown up with. Life didn't magically fix itself after that. David's reputation in Westfield never fully recovered. My relationship with him remained cautious, built on a foundation of guarded hope. But for the first time, it was real. 2 years later, we still meet once a month. Sometimes for coffee, sometimes for dinner. We talk, not just about the past, but about books, city life, even the awkwardness of starting over. He's not the man he used to be, and I'm not the boy who needed his approval. Catherine's bracelet now sits on my bookshelf next to my degree. A reminder that family isn't defined by blood or last names. It's defined by the choices we make, the apologies we're willing to offer, and the forgiveness we're brave enough to give. The truth had shattered David's perfect world, but from those shards, we built something far more valuable, an honest one. Because in the end, the most powerful revenge wasn't exposing his lies. It was showing him that his lies couldn't define me. And that, perhaps, was the victory Catherine would have been proud of. Life had settled into a fragile rhythm. Columbia was behind me, and I had accepted a junior analyst role at a mid-tier investigative firm in Manhattan. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a place where truth still mattered. I thought the chapter with David, Lisa, and Michael was closed. But secrets have a way of lingering in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to reemerge. It began with an envelope. No return address. No sender's name. Just a thick stack of documents left at my apartment door one rainy Thursday evening. Inside were financial reports, shell company ledgers, and a photograph that stopped me cold. It was Lisa, older, her hair shorter, but unmistakably her, sitting across from a man I didn't recognize in a luxury hotel lounge. Beneath the photo, scribbled in hurried handwriting, was a single line. Catherine was never just an accident. The storm that had once torn my family apart was not over. It had merely shifted course. I spent the next hours buried in the documents, piecing together fragments of a puzzle I didn't know existed. The ledgers revealed a network of offshore accounts linked to Richardson Holdings. Transactions involving names I'd never seen before. Payments tied to legal settlements, hush money, and, most disturbingly, medical expenses related to Catherine's illness. Could it be possible? Had David's empire been built on more than corporate ruthlessness? Was Catherine's death part of a larger scheme? I needed answers, and I wasn't going to find them in New York. That night, I called David. "I need to see you. It's about Mom." His voice was tired but concerned. "I'll be at the old house. Come by tomorrow." The Richardson house stood like a mausoleum of past grandeur. Its walls, once lined with Catherine's warmth, now felt sterile despite David's attempts to reclaim authenticity. He greeted me with a cautious smile, but when I laid out the documents, his expression shifted to pure dread. "Where did you get these?" he asked, his hands trembling as he sifted through the files. "Someone wants me to know what happened," I said. "And I think you do too." David collapsed into the armchair, burying his face in his hands. For minutes, he said nothing. When he finally looked up, his eyes were clouded with a truth he had hidden for far too long. Catherine's diagnosis came at the worst possible time. He began. The company was vulnerable. Investors were circling like sharks. "Michael," he saw an opportunity. My heart pounded. "What do you mean, opportunity?" "Michael convinced me to divert company funds into experimental treatments. Off the books. He said we could save her, keep her illness quiet, and protect the company's image. But it wasn't charity. It was leverage." David's voice cracked. When Catherine's condition worsened, Michael tightened his grip. He controlled the finances, the board, and even Lisa. I was a puppet in my own company. The photograph of Lisa with the unknown man took on new weight. "Who is he?" David hesitated. "That's Henry Dalton. He was Catherine's lawyer, and Lisa's accomplice." The pieces clicked. Lisa's sudden integration into our family, her manipulative hold over David, Michael's ascendancy, all part of a calculated power play. But what I didn't understand was why now. Why send me these documents after all this time? David's answer chilled me. "Because you're the last loose end, Blake, and someone wants to tie it up." Over the next days, David and I dived into the archives of Richardson Holdings. The deeper we looked, the clearer it became that Michael's betrayal was more than personal. It was a corporate coup. He had orchestrated Catherine's marginalization, leveraging her illness to seize control. Lisa was planted as a distraction, a wedge to fracture whatever emotional resistance David had left. But exposing this wasn't going to be as simple as a graduation speech. We needed hard evidence, and the only person who could provide that was Henry Dalton. Finding him wasn't difficult. Dalton had retreated to a high-rise apartment in Chicago, living comfortably off the money siphoned from Richardson Holdings. I reached out under the guise of a legal inquiry, setting up a meeting at a neutral location. David wanted to come. I insisted he stay back. This was a fight that required a different kind of strategy, one built on patience, observation, and, when necessary, the element of surprise. The cafe in downtown Chicago was quiet when Dalton arrived. He hadn't aged well. Guilt has a way of etching itself into a person's features. When he saw me, his face went pale. "You look just like Catherine," he muttered. "I know about Michael, about Lisa, and about you," I said. Dalton leaned back, a bitter smile forming. "Of course you do. The question is, what are you going to do with that knowledge?" "I'm going to finish what my mother started. I'm going to dismantle every lie you built." Dalton sighed, the weight of his choices finally catching up. "You're braver than David ever was." She would have been proud. He slid a flash drive across the table. "Everything's on there. Emails, contracts, even recorded conversations. But be careful. Exposing this will bring down more than just Michael." Dalton left without another word. Back in New York, David and I spent nights going through the data. It was worse than we imagined. Michael's corruption wasn't contained within the company. It spread into politics, real estate, and even healthcare institutions. But in the middle of this chaos, amidst the files and sleepless nights, I met her, Elena Morales, an investigative journalist who had been chasing Michael for years. Our paths crossed when she reached out anonymously, seeking a source. What started as cautious collaboration evolved into late-night calls, strategy sessions, and eventually, something more personal. Elena had her scars too. Michael had destroyed her brother's business through corporate espionage. Her pursuit of justice wasn't just professional, it was deeply personal. Together, we crafted a plan. A final expose that would not just dismantle Michael, but cleanse the Richardson legacy of its deepest stains. But the danger was escalating. Anonymous threats arrived in emails. "Strange cars are parked outside my apartment." The message was clear: back off. But they underestimated how much I had learned about fighting back. As we approached the final stages of our expose, the line between professional and personal blurred. Elena and I found solace in each other amidst the storm. Our bond wasn't built on shared trauma. It was built on a shared refusal to let that trauma define us. The countdown had begun. In less than a week, the story would go live. Michael's empire would crumble. The Richardson name, once synonymous with power and deception, would be redefined by truth. But we knew Michael wouldn't go down without a fight. And as the days ticked by, the real question became, how far would he go to silence us? The battle was no longer about revenge. It was about survival. The week leading up to the expose's release was a blur of strategy meetings, encrypted messages, and sleepless nights. Elena and I worked tirelessly, cross-referencing Dalton's files with the public records, building a narrative so airtight that even Michael's most loyal allies would struggle to defend him. But with every new revelation, the threats intensified. David's townhouse became our unofficial war room. He was different now, no longer the cold, corporate tactician, but a man desperate to right the wrongs that had destroyed his family. The irony wasn't lost on me. The father who once sought to erase me from his life was now risking everything to protect me. One evening, while we were piecing together timelines, Elena received a call. Her face went pale. "They found Dalton. He's dead. Car accident. But it smells like a cover-up." Dalton's death was a message. A brutal reminder that Michael wasn't playing games. Elena's voice shook with a mix of fear and defiance. "We can't delay, Blake. We release the expose now, or we may not live to tell the story. But rushing will be dangerous. The story needed to be bulletproof. We decided to move the timeline up by 48 hours. It was a gamble, but necessary. The night before the release, David called me into his study. He was holding a small velvet box. Inside was Catherine's bracelet. I took it back from Lisa during the divorce. It belongs with you now. As he fastened it around my wrist, a rare moment of peace washed over me. Catherine's presence, her unwavering sense of justice, felt palpable. The next morning, Elena and I uploaded the expose to every major news outlet, backed by documents, audio files, and a pre-recorded video statement. In it, I laid bare the full extent of Michael's crimes: corporate fraud, money laundering, manipulation of medical trials, and the calculated dismantling of our family. The impact was immediate. News alerts flooded every screen. Social media exploded. Michael Richardson's empire was unraveling in real time. But victory came at a price. That evening, as Elena and I returned to my apartment, we found the door ajar. The place had been ransacked, drawers emptied, hard drives smashed, and a chilling message spray-painted on the wall. Stop or you're next. Fear coursed through me, but beneath it was a steel resolve. They could destroy property, but they couldn't erase the truth. Not this time. David insisted we stay with him. Security was tightened. Reporters camped outside. We were no longer hidden figures. We were the faces of a corporate uprising. 2 days later, a warrant was issued for Michael's arrest. But he had vanished. Disappeared from his penthouse, his accounts frozen, his allies jumping ship. The man who had built an empire on control was now a fugitive. In the aftermath, David and I sat on the same patio where, years ago, he had begged for my forgiveness. This time, there was no pretense. Just a father and son, finally united by a shared purpose. You did what I couldn't, Blake, he said quietly. You exposed the truth. Catherine would be proud. Elena joined us, her hand finding mine. The storm that had hovered over us for so long was finally breaking. In the weeks that followed, Richardson Holdings was dismantled. Its assets are liquidated to fund scholarships, healthcare reforms, and investigative journalism initiatives. A legacy of lies transformed into a beacon of accountability. Elena and I, now partners in both life and work, founded a media platform dedicated to exposing corporate corruption. We named it The Mosaic, a tribute to the shattered pieces we had painstakingly put back together. As for Michael, he was eventually found hiding in a private villa overseas. His arrest was uneventful, but the trial that followed captivated the nation. His fall was not just a personal defeat, but a symbol of the consequences of unchecked greed and betrayal. On the anniversary of Catherine's death, David, Elena, and I visited her grave. We didn't speak. Words weren't necessary. The silence was a testament to a battle fought and won. Forgiveness had been the beginning. Truth had been the weapon. But love, in its raw, unyielding form, had been the victory. The Richardson name would no longer echo in boardrooms and scandal sheets, but in the hearts of those who dared to believe that justice, though often delayed, is never truly denied. And for the first time, I wasn't living in the shadow of my family's past. I was shaping its future.